Good afternoon. My name is David Ives. I'm the Executive Director of the Albert Schweitzer Institute at Quinnipiac University. I'm glad so many people could come out. It's been my job and pleasure to coordinate some of the activities of these commemoration ceremonies for today, tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. I feel that since this is such an important day in the celebration in terms of the history of our country, the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I think that it's something that we should all pay attention to and do a certain amount of reflection on what happened 10 years ago and how it has changed and affected our country. Before I introduce the panel that's going to speak, I just wanted to mention that we did have 3 Quinnipiac University alumni who did die on 9/11. I want to mention their names. One is a guy named James Cappers who graduated from Quinnipiac in 1992 with a degree in finance and worked as an assistant vice president at Marsh and McLennan on the 92nd floor of the World Trade Center. He was killed and left a wife and 2 boys when the towers fell. Another one is a guy named Frank Brennan, who studied here at Quinnipiac in the late 1980s and early 1990s. He was actually a basketball player here at Quinnipiac. Did not graduate, but he was the senior vice president and limited partner at Cantor Fitzgerald in the World Trade Center. And the last person that died that was a Quinnipiac alum was a guy named Timothy Kelly, who graduated from Quinnipiac in 1985 and was a municipal bond broker with Cantor Fitzgerald. He had 3 children when he died, 6, 3, and he had a little girl who was born about a week before the 9/11 actually occurred. So I just want to remember that Quinnipiac's family was directly affected by this terrible event that occurred 10 years ago. So our first panel is about personal reflections on 9/11 and how that event affected us in our world. And I have 3 great panelists. I'm going to introduce to you now, and then they'll come up and speak in turn. The first speaker is going to be Liam O'Brien, who is chair of the Department of Film, Video, and Interactive Media and is an Emmy and other award-winning professor of communications at Quinnipiac. His research interests include theatrical feature film, television, and interactive media production in Ireland, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Propaganda and disinformation during wartime and natural history, and adventure documentary filmmaking. He has worked as a director and/or producer for Discovery Communications, Turner Broadcasting, National Wildlife Productions, Audubon Productions, and CBS News, and has served in a variety of production capacities on over a dozen feature films. Our next speaker will be Professor Anat Biletzki. Professor Biletzki has been teaching at the philosophy department at Tel Aviv University since 1979. She has traveled widely as a visiting scholar and fellow at, among other places, Cambridge University, Harvard University, Boston University, the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, and the Wittgenstein Archives in Bergen, Norway. She is presently the Albert Schweitzer Professor at Quinnipiac University and has also taught human rights here and at MIT. Her publications include books and articles on Ludwig Wittgenstein, Thomas Hobbes, analytic philosophy, political thought, digital culture, and human rights. She has served as the chair of the Graduate School of Cultural Studies and of the Philosophy Department at Tel Aviv University, and is a member of Israel's Ministry of Education Committee for Teaching Philosophy in High Schools. Her book, Talking Wolves, Thomas Hobbes on the Language of Politics and the Politics of Language, begin with the words, "Philosophy is my profession, politics is my life." Appropriately, her current research focuses on human rights and on peace studies and the peace industry. Our last speaker will be one of the newest employees here at Quinnipiac University. Her name is Shamshad Sheikh. She is originally from Pakistan. She has been a Muslim chaplain for various colleges and universities for the last 15 years. Her most recent position she held was at Yale University, where she served as Associate University Chaplain. She received her bachelor's from Karachi University, her law degree from S.M. Law College of Karachi, Pakistan, and her MBA from American International College. She completed a graduate certificate in religious study from Hartford Seminary in June 2009, and she has a certificate in the Arabic language from Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. These are our speakers, and can we welcome them with a round of applause? Our first one is Liam. Please take it away, Liam.
Thank you, David. I'm not going to really talk so much about my reactions to 9/11 and the aftermath of the past 10 years, but some of that will probably come up when we have questions and answers. I can tell you, however, in January 2006, I had 11 Quinnipiac University students filming in Bokap, which is a predominantly Muslim area in Cape Town. That particular day we were there was the day that Saddam Hussein was executed. And that might be something to talk about in terms of what the reaction was in the community to us. Because it's very obvious when you are touring around with a number of American university students. Well, what I do want to do in this case is to take a look at, in some degree, some of the things I'm interested in researching, which is the opinions, international opinion, specifically Arab world opinion about us and what's happened over the past 10 years. Traditionally, the United States has certainly used the common media, television, radio, print, to get its point across and its opinion. Additionally, you may well know that it uses the Voice of America, which you don't get to see or hear very much in the United States, but is rather like the BBC and Bush House, except it's broadcast overseas. But what I have on the screen is a very odd-looking airplane. And it's the other way that we attempt to, if you will, influence hearts and minds. And it's something you have probably never seen before. Can anybody give me an idea of what looks odd about this aircraft?
It's got huge bombs on it.
No, those are actually fuel tanks.
Whatever those extra wings that are coming off the tail.
Yes, very good. You have found the broadcast device. This is the interior of that aircraft. There's more than one. In fact, there are about 8. Commando Silo 2 is a flying radio station and television station. It holds the capacity to jam or to remove any terrestrial television or radio station on the planet and replace itself on those airway frequencies. It can jam the entire spectrum of communications, it fires chaff, and it can intercept military communications. So it's basically a flying information platform. You may have noticed in the previous shot that it, in fact, is propeller driven and is refuelable and can spend up to 30 hours in the air in any one shift before it's replaced by another one exactly like it. These are a few more shots of the interior, and it's being refueled. It is managed by an organization called the 193rd Special Operations Wing, PSYOPs, that is Psychological Operations, out of Middletown, Pennsylvania. Nice shot of it flying over the Statue of Liberty. But it does other things too. It is an information platform for the dissemination of leaflets. Of course, leaflets go back way back to World War I as a way of influencing opinion, and it has leaflet bombs. And here are a few examples of the kinds of things that it does. The Iraqis had a radio station called Mother of All Battles Radio. They obliterated it from the airwaves and replaced it by information radio on the following frequencies down below. Commando Solo, by the way, has been flying since the mid-1980s, when it began over Bosnia, and has flown in every American conflict since then. It has dropped out numerous leaflets. In this particular case, you have to read this way: if you shoot at us, we will fire at you and destroy you, in essence. You might notice the World Trade Center on the right and an inscription commentary on the left. You could translate in a bit. And of course, there are leaflets and other things that are done in Afghanistan. The Partnership of Nations is here to assist. It also recently, let me see if I can minimize this, has shown up. Oh, I should show you this first. And you can find these all online. These are a large number of the scripts that are broadcast. In this case, these are scripts that are broadcast over Afghanistan. The Partnership of Nations is here to help, which of course is the same as the leaflet bomb. And there are various scripts on this. Taliban actions are non-Islamic. Taliban, and there are several of those. These are all read and recorded and broadcast in the air over frequencies in Afghanistan or previously in Iraq. Uh-oh, don't want to do that. Sorry, let me just minimize it. It is over Libya. And to do this, I sort of have to, oh, it is plugged in. I hope this isn't too loud. Let me see how this works.
Simple vessel, remain injured, do not leave port. If you not be resumed enforcement of violating a United Nations resolution over the end of hostilities in your country. If you attempt to leave port, you will be attacked and destroyed immediately. For your own safety, do not leave port. Les désobéissants doivent rester en port. Le gouvernement de la Libye désobéit à une résolution des Nations Unies d'arrêter les hostilités dans votre pays. Si vous attendez de quitter le port, vous serez attaqué et détruit immédiatement. Pour votre propre bien, ne quittez pas le port.
In Arabic now, French before. In essence, this was an appeal for the for all military Iraqi boats not to leave harbor, and if they did, they would be sunk in the Mediterranean. So Commando Solo serves numerous functions of both military and, if you will, more directed towards civilians. So this kind of led me to an inquiry of how does the world view us now? And I went back to 5 months after that day that I was with those Quinnipiac students in Bokap in Cape Town, South Africa. And I went to, first thing I found that I thought was rather interesting, if I can find my cursor, was testimony of Dr. Stephen Cull, Director of Program on International Policy Attitudes, University of Maryland, worldpublicopinion.org. And in his testimony in front of Congress in May of 2007, he stated that while popularity is not intrinsically good, his research showed that anti-American feelings made it easier for al-Qaeda to operate and to grow in the Muslim world. International opinion of the Bush administration and the U.S. government in nations where he reviewed existing polls and conducted focus groups in his own in-depth surveys. The most negative were the Egyptians. 93%, this is 2007, 93% expressed a negative attitude towards the United States. You can see those in the graph on the left. 86% of that number were very unfavorable. In Morocco, 76% had an unfavorable view, with 48% very unfavorable. In Pakistan, 67% had an unfavorable view, with 49% very unfavorable. The most moderate responses were in Indonesia, where 66% had an unfavorable view, and a more modest 16% had a very unfavorable view. I want to quote just a bit from his testimony. He said, "For decades, polls in the Muslim world and the statements of Muslim leaders have shown a variety of resentments about U.S. policies. Muslims share the worldwide view that the U.S. does not live up to its own ideas of international law and democracy. There have also been specific complaints that the U.S. favors Israel over the Palestinians and the Arab world as a whole, that the U.S. exploits the Middle East for its oil, and that it hypocritically supports non-democratic governments that accommodate its interests. These attitudes persist. But now, there is also a new feeling about the U.S. has emerged in the wake of 9/11. This is not so much an intensification of negative feelings towards the U.S. as much as a new perception of American intentions. Now, there seems to be a perception that the U.S. has entered into a war against Islam itself," close quote. So this was Professor Cull's opinion almost 5 years ago. And this was to Congress, so it's not like the government hasn't directly heard these words. And it raises a major issue, even from 4 years ago, that winning hearts and minds appears to be something of an uphill battle. So I decided to fast forward to the present and to see where we might be at. A really interesting site to look at is Pew. And in this particular case, the opinion of the United States as voiced by about 30,000 participants in the surveys who were simply asked a simple question, whether or not they felt that they had a favorable or unfavorable view of the United States. That was the question. You can see Japan and Kenya, the United States itself, France, Lithuania, and Israel all came in around 85 to 72% favorable. And this is 2011, not 2007. This is 4 years later. But basically the same numbers as you saw in the original Cull survey of 2007. So I said, well, gee, what was it like before? So I went and I actually looked at the survey, the exact same question from 2002. These are the survey results from the same question in 2002. Philippines 90, Ivory Coast 85, Uzbekistan, Ghana, Guatemala, Venezuela, Honduras, Kenya, Ukraine, Poland, Nigeria, Britain, Uganda, and Bulgaria, and Canada, and Japan all get to where in 2011 America starts. They're higher than that. And again, when you look down even in 2002, way at the bottom, Bangladesh, Lebanon, Argentina, Turkey, Jordan, and Pakistan. So I then said, well, that's all well and good, but I wonder if there's something that's not exactly scientific that might prove interesting for you to listen to. And I came across Al Jazeera's 2011 survey of attitudes in the aftermath of 9/11. Let me see if this is going to pop for me. It's going to take a second to load because it's graphic heavy. And Al Jazeera went around the world asking people what they thought of what their reminiscences were of 9/11 and what they thought of the United States. And I thought I might play a few of these without hopefully butchering every name in the book. This is Australia. It's kind of done by country. East Timor. Let's start with Kareem here. Kareem Omar, the owner of a flower shop in Cairo, Egypt. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta do something.
أول مرة تحصل وما حدش كان يتخيلها إيه اللي يحصل بس كان يوم غريب وكده وقلق وكده بعدين اليوم ده غير اقتصاد.
I can try that again. I have to trigger the lower thirds. Can you all see the lower thirds?
العالم كله
Yeah.
حاجة أول مرة تحصل وما حدش كان يتخيلها إيه اللي يحصل ده. بس كان يوم غريب وكده وقلق وكده وبعدين اليوم ده غير اقتصاد أمريكا أكيد طبعا وغير السياسة بين أمريكا وبين العالم كله والبلاد كلها بس.
Wadi Adel is a teacher in Cairo, Egypt.
لا هي أثرت علينا كمنظرنا كعرب وخاصة بعض الناس اللي بتقول المسلمين إرهابيين وخلت يعني من العرب كلهم يبقى عشان ياخد تأشيرة لأي دولة أجنبية صعب خاصة أمريكا يعني بوظت منظرنا كتير قدام العالم وما فاتتناش أي حاجة.
Ahmed Youssef is the senior leader of Hamas in Gaza.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I do remember the first moment I have seen that plane hit the first tower and the second one, and also when the third plane hit the Pentagon. I've been stunned by the scale of damage that happened, the number of the people who been killed. It is something to me inconceivable in that moment. I know there is anti-American sentiment everywhere, but who are going to be having all these kind of hatred and bitterness to do something like this? And that's why the American, all of them, come out to say why they hate us when they heard that Arabs are Muslim. Actually, behind that scene, behind that heinous act, the question came on every Americans to say loudly why they hate us. The answer, unfortunately, until now, is not being answered by the American administration or by scholars to tell the Americans why all the people around the world or around the globe, they still hating America, and America is still suffering from anti-American sentiment. Of course, after that, America moved all their power behind how to undermine the Al-Qaeda and how to undermine the Islamists all over around the world. And it became the mission for Mr. Bush, or President Bush, how to target what they call it, the Islamists everywhere. Or to me, it's why targeting Islam under the auspices of terrorism. Since that time, I do believe the campaign to demonize the Arab world and Muslim countries, and especially the Islamists. Every Islamist being stigmatized by extremists and radicalism. So that's why the thing is still, this George Bush 8 years, and after that Mr. Obama, still everybody playing the card of terrorism. So that's why we are still suffering, and this kind of hatred and bitterness between Arab and Muslim and the Americans still there. If everybody knows that America being hated most because the way they are supporting Israel, the rogue state, and still behind giving Israeli all kind of diplomatic support, military support, and financial support. So that's why Israel actually committing all the crimes against humanity and war crimes, and unfortunately the America still consider Israel one of their best allies. So that's today I do believe for the American to fix their relation with the Arab and Muslim world, they have to look to Israel not an asset but as an liability.
I'll play 3 more. They're all shorter. Down here at 5 Tucson. And I would encourage you to go and take a look at this and see what many, many other voices say. Fizahat Ahsan is a teacher in Pakistan.
Well, I remember waking up in the morning and switching on the television and being confronted by these horrendous images of an aeroplane crashing into this building that has always, for us, in a way, been a symbol of New York. And I remember that we were, well, all of us were glued to the television screen for the rest of the day, watching as events unfolded during the day. And I remember that the first reactions, of course, were one of shock and horror. And well, I think the whole world was really shocked by what was happening, and it was really impossible for anybody at that point to try and understand what had happened. And I think that, you know, we all just, well, for several days, I think there was this this feeling that, you know, that nobody knew what had happened and why it had happened and why anything of the sort would happen. So that shock continued on, of course. Now it's been many years and we look back on it and perhaps we can come to some conclusions as to why it happened and, you know, what the whole story behind it was. But on that particular day, I remember that everybody was just stunned by it. The whole world, the whole scenario of the world, the political scenario has changed completely. I think what we've seen since 9/11 is one world power that has emerged from it with the right to be world policeman without very many questions asked. And especially on a national level in Pakistan, our lives have been turned completely upside down by 9/11, with America having a growing influence in the country, with a lot happening that even we Pakistanis are not aware of. There is an American presence in this country that I think most of us don't even know very much about. There is a lot of violence. I think that, in fact, 9/11 has helped spread terrorism rather than curb terrorism in a way, especially where our country is concerned. We've seen everything, you know, just completely turned upside down with all the bombings happening and the drone attacks in the north and our own people breaking up. There have been rebellions in different parts of the country that we had never heard of before. So I think that all of us have been very, very affected by 9/11 on a personal level, on a national level, and of course on a world level as well.
Oh, sorry. Malema Lodi, Pakistan's former ambassador to the United States.
Well, I was Pakistan's ambassador in Washington at the time, and with the Director General of the ISI, I was on Capitol Hill meeting with congressional members of the Intelligence Committee. And at that time, the bells rang, the emergency bells on Capitol Hill rang, and we had to evacuate the place because we discovered subsequently that 2 planes had hit the Twin Towers and that another plane had gone into the Pentagon, and we saw smoke billowing from where we were, in fact, as we came out of the building, the Senate building at that time. So my clearest memory is of conversations that were going on at that time about precisely this kind of a threat to the United States when the threat actually materialized. I think the world changed with America's response to 9/11, because what we saw after that was America resort to war as an answer to terrorism. And that had devastating consequences for our region, for Pakistan, for Afghanistan, because what we saw for 10 years then was a war of revenge in Afghanistan rather than a war of strategy. And for 10 years, we heard about war, destabilization, instability, and I think it's so important now to get past the post-9/11 mindset.
And finally, I'm going to leave you with a few students, a few college students in Pakistan, and something that might well surprise you.
The events of September 11th have had a huge impact around the world, but the ramifications of which are still being felt today here in Pakistan. I'm at the Islamabad College of Arts and Sciences with Year 11 students. Good morning, class. Good morning. Let's talk a little bit about September 11th. What have you been taught about that day?
Well, officially, the event of 9/11 has not been part of our history courses. So we haven't been taught about it properly in class. Yes, I do think that it should be taught all over Pakistan, because this is an incident that has affected Muslims directly so much, and you know, the image of Muslims in the world. It's important for Muslims over here to know exactly what happened, what the aggression people abroad or wherever have against Muslims, and how to be able to project ourselves better.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's go right over here. Let's talk to you for a minute. What have you learned about this September 11th attacks, which took place 10 years ago?
Well, I mean, for the past 10 years, we've only been seeing on the news what America have been showing us. What we learn every day is that, you know, it's still a fight of who's powerful between the extremists and the Americans. You haven't been exactly taught about the event, but you know how it is you know, affecting us as students, as the common public of Pakistan.
Okay, some interesting views there here at the Islamabad College of Arts and Sciences. The effects of September 11th, well, not being taught in classrooms like this is certainly an issue that many of these students know about, and of course brings about some very strong emotions.
Do you want to come up here? Oh, sure. Can you see me if I sit down? Or?
I think you can sit down just as easily.
Okay.
More comfortable, that's fine.
More comfortable. I can't see David. Thank you, David. And thanks, Leah, for this. I have been looking at those interviews made by Al Jazeera for the past several days, and they are striking. But since we've been asked to talk about reflections on 9/11, let me start with a memory, with a reminiscence, just like most of those interviews began. What happened in 9/11? I was in Israel in 9/11. By the time we heard about it, it was early evening, late afternoon, early evening. And the day after, which was our morning, your night, I went up to the Jaffe Center for Security Studies at Tel Aviv University, which, interestingly enough, is housed in the building of humanities. Think of that, security studies in humanities. That already says a lot. But I went up there and met with General Shlomo Gazit, who happened to have been a friend earlier, just to ask him. He was the director, he was the general chief of Israeli military intelligence during the 1973 war until 1985, and I thought that someone like him would be able to say something enlightening about what had happened. This was, again, that day. This was September 12th. And he said to me, it depends what we do now, we being Israel, what we do now, it depends whether we will use this for the good or abuse it. He was smart enough to know that 9/11 could be used for the good or abused. Now, I come from Israel, I come from philosophy, and I come from human rights, actually in reverse order of importance. So I look at this for a moment from the philosophical aspect, and not just philosophical, but philosophy of language. And I want to ask about certain things that have seeped into our language, certain things that have taken over our discourse since 9/11. When I say philosophy, I don't only mean philosophy of language, I mean critical thinking. I know this is starting to sound like the essential learning outcomes here at Quinnipiac. Critical thinking and language. But those are the things that invigorate what I'm trying to ask here. And when I look back at the last 10 years, but especially what started happening right after 9/11 in Israel, there are two words that stand out: security and terrorism. Security and terrorism as two concepts that took over our lives. Took over our lives in Israel, I dare say took over your lives here in the United States, and perhaps internationally, though I'm not equipped to say what has happened all over the world, more about Israel and the United States. What I want to get to at the end, but I'm just hinting at it now, is that both of these words, security and terrorism, stand in dire contrast to concepts of human rights. But I'll get to that at the end. As I said, human rights is what interests me more than anything else. Security and terrorism are the two concepts that Israel and the United States latched onto in September of 2001. Not that these concepts didn't exist beforehand. Of course they did. But something happened in 9/11 that made it possible to use those words in ways that they hadn't been used before, or as Shlomo Gazit said, to abuse those words. Those of us who do research, and you'll hear a lot about this, I think, this afternoon in the panel on Homeland Security and international law, but those of us who do research on security and on these issues, on war and peace, just war, all of these things, have been trying to define the word terrorism forever. If you Google it, you will find millions, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of sites under definitions of terrorism. One of those interviews, one that you didn't show, but I think by Anwar Sheikh Khalil, a young man there says, America redefined terrorism. America, and I'm adding here Israel, decided to use that word terrorism as a coverall. Terrorism became not the excuse for the authorities, it was the reason to do whatever the powers that be wanted to do. You're probably all aware of that. There's a famous saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That comes out of a novel, by the way, a novel from 1975 by Seymour Gilmore or something like that. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I've even seen websites that analyze that, asking, could you say it the other way around? One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. If you try thinking about that analysis, you realize that terrorism can be used in very many ways. What has happened in the wake of 9/11 is that terrorism became a catch-all for what authorities in Israel and in the United States wanted to do. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that there was not terrorism. I would never say that 9/11 was not an act of terrorism, or that suicide bombers in Israel were not acts of terrorism. They are. But I think it was the last person that you had up here, or maybe the one before, was it the ambassador? Yes, the ambassador that says that America started a war against terrorism. But the question is then, what is this a war against? Who are you fighting when you fight terrorism? Is every Palestinian a terrorist? Is every Palestinian fighter a terrorist? Are people in Afghanistan, in Iraq, that we target, are they all terrorists, or are they soldiers, fighters, and sometimes even civilians? So the word terrorism was made to do very problematic work here. Larger than the word terrorism is the word security in general. And again, it is not that 9/11 was not a matter of security, and it is not that Israel is not bothered by issues of security. Of course they are. It's just that when you allow security to take over your train of thought, when you allow security to be the first priority in both domestic and international policy, of course, foreign policy and domestic policy, you sort of lose track of what you're doing. You lose priorities. You lose a sense of assessment as to what is most important when security becomes the umbrella under which you put everything. There is, by the way, a book that came out just a few months ago by Priest and Arkin, Priest from the Washington Post, called, what's it called, Top Secret America. And the numbers there, I think I have them here. This doesn't have to do with international stuff. This should be interesting for you as Americans. The numbers there are that there are 1,300 government facilities, security facilities, in every state, in all the states in America together. There are 2,000 outside companies used as contractors for security, and there are 850,000, that is 1 million people almost, that have top secret security clearance in the United States. 1 million people who are deep inside this security industry, watching over others or doing security work. Now, I realize this is not an international thing. This is a domestic issue for us to worry about here in the United States. But all of these security contractors are working all over the place, and this is one of the things that I would look at to answer Liam's question at the end: what are we to do? What do we do when we have such a large expansion of this concept of security and, of course, the practical implications of the concept itself? I don't remember if we heard him. Did you hear Abdul Hadi? I don't think we had Abdul Hadi up there. Nasser Abdul Hadi at some point says up there, but one of the people that you had up there did say this, that what was called terrorist became a general generic name for Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians. Now, when I teach about the Middle East, the first thing I do is try to differentiate between Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians. These are 3 different groups. When you lump them all together doing security, you are engaging, well, first of all, in racism and discrimination, of course. But under security, they all become terrorists. One of the people you had up there was more nuanced. He said extremists or Islamists, fundamental Islamists rather than Muslims. But Abdul Hadi says, no, they just put it all together. Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians. Look at how language works. One last person up there that we didn't have is Hanan Ashrawi from the Palestinian Authority. She says in the interview with her, after 9/11, the Israelis who were occupiers became the victims, and the Palestinians who were victims of occupation became the culprits. Well, she uses a kind word, the culprits. I use the word terrorist. Palestinians in general are considered terrorists, and I think one of the very icons of this kind of perversion can be had in an example we had in 2004 when a woman trying to go through the checkpoints, a Palestinian woman trying to go through the checkpoints in Palestine, gave birth to a stillborn child at the checkpoint. One of the soldiers who had stopped her there and not let her go to the hospital was interviewed, and he said, well, that baby in 18 years would have been a terrorist. That is the perversion of language, using the word terrorist for something so horrendous. Let me, and I hope this does not sound too ironic, let me just read out an invitation that I received 3 days ago to come to the World Summit on Counterterrorism in Israel. This is what terrorism and security has become. We invite you to participate in ICT, that's the Institute for Counterterrorism, in ICT's 11th International Conference. Listen to how this is voiced. Over 1,200 top decision makers, defense, intelligence, and police officials, prominent academic scholars, and security industry leaders from 60 countries took part in last year's conference. This year, many of them will be joined by hundreds of new participants. We are called to celebrate security and terrorism and anti-terrorism and counterterrorism, and we are enticed by the following. As a conference participant, you will have the unique opportunity to meet key decision makers in the fields of counterterrorism and homeland security, interact with government, defense, and police officials who deal with terrorism on a daily basis, learn about cutting-edge research, new operational practices, and technological innovations from leading international experts, Network, that's a great word, right? Network with entrepreneurs and significantly broaden your customer base in the global security and counterterrorism industry. Participate in discussions and professional workshops on the most advanced and pertinent topics in modern counterterrorism, probably that wonderful plane that you had up there. And widen and diversify your global network of professional relationships in the field of counterterrorism. I saw this 2 days ago, and I knew already that I would be speaking here, and I wondered, does everybody feel what I feel when I read this, so to speak, enticing invitation to come and spread out the tentacles of counterterrorism and security? Before I become too polemic, let me come down to earth and say the following. There's another language that has taken hold, not since 9/11, earlier I think, in the past 2, maybe even 3 decades, and that is the language of human rights, the discourse of human rights. And it's interesting for me that security, the way some of us view it, is the counterpoint, the exact opposite. The language of security is the language that can be used in order to violate human rights. And it's interesting that at the same time that security is blossoming, so is the community, the language, and the discourse of human rights. Israel has used the term security to violate human rights. I've talked about this before at Quinnipiac and in other places, so I won't go into it now. But the settlements, the apartheid roads, the wall that is called the security wall in Israel, the hundreds of checkpoints, all of that is under the guise of security. It is all presented as a mechanism or as a bunch of mechanisms for security. So let me talk about the word commemoration and finish with that. We can decide how we commemorate. We can decide what we want to commemorate. There is on the net a wonderful project by Nancy Murray and another friend, yes, Kate Crockford, that is called What a Difference a Decade Makes, 10 Years of Homeland Security. And what they do there on that site is bring up the list of human rights, civil rights, and mostly civil liberties that have been violated in the United States. An amazing, I'm looking at Jill, an amazing website it is, and I'm sure you'll hear about that this afternoon. What I would like to say is that commemoration, we commemorate things that we honor and respect, not things that we would like to cleanse ourselves of. So here today we are commemorating the civilians that were killed and the heroes of 9/11. We are not commemorating what happened in the 10 years since. We are noting what has happened in the 10 years since. And somebody, Robert Fisk, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a wonderful journalist, wrote yesterday, let's go to beyond post 9/11. So this decade is post 9/11. Let's go beyond that and let's go to human rights, because wonderfully, I should say, human rights and the connection between human rights and security is now on the table. The point is to go forward into human rights and not engage so much in the immediate aftermath and even in the decades since 9/11, but rather look forward. Our commemoration has to be a matter of looking forward. People have noticed that 9/11 is an interesting date for Chile, for something that happened in 1973 in Chile, also violent. I would rather think of Gandhi's words on September 11th, 1906. Think of that. September 11th, 1906, this was the date at which Gandhi in South Africa, in Johannesburg, called the other Indians. They were not called Indians then. It was the coloreds of South Africa, not the blacks, the coloreds of South Africa, to stand up and be counted. But his quote, and I think that is how we should commemorate, his quote is the following: violence will prevail over violence only when someone can prove to me the darkness can be dispelled by darkness. Thank you.
Well, my name is Shamshad Sheikh, and as David introduced as a new Muslim chaplain on campus. So what you will be hearing from me from very chaplain's perspective. I have been working with the students for last 15 years, and I have enjoyed working with the students at different campuses, and I always made sure that I'm available for students. They should come to me and feel comfortable discussing any topic they have in their mind. It doesn't have to be religious or religious advice. It could be their personal issues, it could be academic issues. So when I started this job in 1997, I was the first chaplain in the Eastern Coast. I was enjoying it, working with the student, and just making sure I'm available for everyone. And then this 9/11 happened. And the day that changed my job, my lifestyle, working with the students, when I look back today, what a huge change came in my life. That was the time, the personal effect that I had. My daughter graduated from middle school and starting high school. She was the only Muslim girl in her school, and she was afraid to go to school. She said, "Mommy, I don't want anybody to know I'm Muslim." That made it very difficult for me. And I said, "No, honey, you keep going to school. Don't cover your head if you don't want to, but that's okay." And I noticed from my personal life that when you see a child is affecting, it is a big effect on your life, though. Since then, I have been working with the school, colleges, different institutions, different organizations, what changes I can bring to help these people. I myself suffered. I mean, I was shocked when I heard this. I was teaching that morning, and all of a sudden I got the phone call, and the secretary from our office said, "Get to the office as soon as it's possible. Something happened in New York." I said, "What happened?" And she tried to explain to me. I could not believe this could happen in New York City. It was just it's difficult to hear and accept that. Finally, I did hear there was an attack in New York, and please come to the office. The students are looking for chaplains. So I did go there, and I noticed how difficult it was for me to face this, to feel that it was a huge tragedy that we had facing that day. We hear a lot of stories, but it's different when you experience personally. And this is the tragedy we were experiencing that day. And I know all of us it was so hard, it was difficult to hear, it was difficult to absorb. And we were crying sitting there. Then next thing I hear that we as American Muslim, it's becoming harder for us than anyone else. I said, I myself is suffering here. I myself is so vulnerable. I don't know what to do at this point. But then I noticed that Muslim students are coming and asking me, we need protection. There's something going on campus that we don't feel comfortable. And now, then I found there's another, when you're going through grieving process, you need someone to support you. You need someone to comfort you. Here, I myself was going through this grieving process with the huge tragedy, and trying to make myself stronger for my students to be there for them. And I noticed that how students were crying, they were quiet, they wanted to do something about it. And I said, let's do it. It was not the Muslim issue. I noticed the students from non-Muslim groups also were coming and asking, what can we do at this point? So we did anything to comfort them. We did counseling, we had candle vision, we had panel discussion, we did everything to help our students out. But I have to tell you how difficult it's been since last 10 years. It's been a struggle on the job. It's been a struggle in community. It's been a struggle to travel. I travel globally. I go everywhere. And every time I notice at the airport, security pulls me out. They go through my purse. They go through everything. And I just stand there and I watch them. Hopefully I won't miss my flight. But this has been like this for the last 10 years. I was watching Maliha Lodi. She was the ambassador of Pakistan in the US. And she said it's been the war. It's been the war of revenge instead of it being the war of a strategy. And I believe this has been like that. Here I'm not accepted as an American. I go to Pakistan and they are calling me American. So where do I stand? So all I have to, just wanted to share that how difficult it's been. But look at the good side of it. It had allowed religious center to open their door to invite people to learn about religion. I have been speaking all over United States, out of America also, what my religion stands for. It's the religion of peace. It's the religion of tolerance. We just experienced month of Ramadan last month. And people were asking me, how could you live without eating? This is part of us. Ramadan teaches us the discipline, the tolerance, the patience. That's what the teaching of Islam is. But the way media has presented, it just makes us look bad, even though we have nothing to do with this. And I have to say that students who come, students have told me that when, especially international students, how difficult it is for them to travel, how hard it is at the airport for them. They don't even want to carry a book that has a title says Islam on it. And this fear, why? This is the religion you practice. This is the religion that brings comfort in me. This is the religion I was born with. Why do I have to put it on a side and come out that, no, I'm not Muslim? So treat me like as you will treat as others. And this is the only point where I struggle myself, and I see my students struggle as well. So today when I was asked that I should come and give my person, I was thinking what I'm going to say. Should I share what I have gone through or should I not? But I think we need to share. We need to share because you need to know what other people are going through. We all are suffering. We all still going through those grieving process. My neighbor came to me, she said her daughter was supposed to have baby on September 11, 2 years ago. She told doctor, don't do the delivery, just wait the baby till next day, because that date has such a difficult effects on anybody's mind. And it's not been I believe it's been difficult date for every one of us. I think it has changed the entire world. I have gone to London, I have gone to Philippines, I have gone to anywhere I was in Egypt last year. How it's been difficult, even though Egypt was ally for US. Even with all that, we face this difficulty because I carry American passport and I will be considered as American. Then they ask me, what's your asal? What's your asal? What's your background? What's your reality? Then I tell them, oh, I was born in Pakistan. So they, oh, okay, now you're okay. So there's been so much negative about America, and you tell them, no, people are wonderful, it's so beautiful. It's just the politicians' game are playing. This is their problem. People have very negative image about America out there. And no matter what I say, what I try to do, it does not change their mind. I think our politician needs to work on that. We need to work on our foreign policy. We need to do something about it. On the name of security, so many people have hurt. I know some people in New York City. My own friend's son was killed on September 11th in New York. And I mean, it's strange that we have to be treated like you are the enemy. I mean, I have been struggling with this. I hope for the good days. And it's change a little, but I don't know how long will it take to change the whole image that media has created out there. I was at the mall 2 weeks ago. I was just walking only. A woman came in front of me. She pulled her child, so angry face on, and looking at me like this. She said, "Honey, move here. You're coming in front of someone who's mean to this world." I just sat on the bench for a little while. And I said, I have to hear this again now. Every time it's been an ongoing process. Every time you go out, you hear something. But I hope we are in academic setting, we think differently, because that's what I experienced on my campus at that time in 9/11 and 2001, how the whole community came and they protected us as a safe blanket. And I thought that was beautiful, and I really appreciated that. So I believe academic has very different environment than out in community. But let's face the reality, we have to be out in community as well too. So I will end this with the hope, and I pray the future of America and future of the rest of the people will be good, inshallah.
We have time for a few questions, if there are any. And I wanted to thank the panelists for their moving speeches and thoughts. I really appreciated what you had to say, very thought-provoking. I hope that some of you might have some questions. Go ahead.
Have you guys seen any efforts to change that perception across the globe, or even at home here, of Muslims and Muslims about us here in America? Any efforts from our either politicians or the media, or whoever you want to speak to?
Well, I can only speak for, as an American when I've traveled abroad. I made it a point of saying I was Irish when I was in Cairo, which is really odd, because I've also lived in Belfast, and I knew a lot of guys in the Irish Republican Army. And the guys in the Irish Republican Army liked pizza, they drank Carling Black Label beer, and they really liked American country Western music. This is your, freedom fighter or terrorist. So there was a certain time, I'm sure, that if I said I was Irish in Cairo, they'd go, oh, geez, But now being Irish in Cairo is quite a good thing. And I don't know what other people's reaction have been overseas, but certainly as an American, you will be asked questions when you travel. And I think you best try to come up with some answers before you go, unless you want to pretend you're Canadian. Irish, but just the outlooking experience. In here, there are many other issues in the United States.
What do you mean when you say efforts?
Well, efforts as in trying to change the perception in the larger populace.
Well, I think it's a matter of context. There's media trying to change the perception. There's academia. I always worry about the size of our bubble. It's very easy for me to say human rights because I am in an academic environment or in the human rights community. I always wonder what happens just outside the door of those bubbles, how small or large those bubbles are, and how effective they are. And I think Shamshad was talking about that, about the encounter with the outside world, so to speak. And that outside world, the way to go with that outside world, cynically enough, is through advertising and journalism and things other than workshops like this one, which is not to say that we're not trying to do things here. But life is very easy in academia. It's much harder in the real world.
But I just want to respond to your, there are students programs they are inviting, especially when now I'm new here, but most of my events are going to be open to everyone. And I love to see non-Muslim coming too, because that's one way to have some relationship, some interaction, to learn about each other. And there are many programs out there. I know one group is called JAM, Jewish and Muslim group, and they do programs together. I'm planning to do a lot of programs with Rabbi on campus as well. So we will invite you. Please come if you see any poster or any advertisement or any announcement out there, because that's what my goal is, to reach out the community.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment about some of the effects of 9/11 that might be covered in the Homeland Security part, but that we are very lucky at this point that international students inside the U.S. have continued to come to the U.S. and seek out the U.S. as a destination to spend their tuition dollars, because for a few years after 9/11, it was very difficult for students coming on visas because the terrorists in the airplane had converted themselves to student visas, and so it was sort of a direct connection with students on student visas, and it was an easy sort of crackdown for the U.S. government to say, well, this is a population that we can monitor, and if we're going to give them a visa, we're going to monitor them. And so now the industry of international students in the U.S. is monitored by the U.S. government. There is a database that universities upload information into about international students. That was not in place in 2001. And also there was, for a few years, a very inconvenient process of when international students entered the U.S., certain males in a certain age group from certain countries had to actually, after they entered the U.S. and checked into the university, had to actually be driven or taken up to Hartford for a secondary inspection within 30 days of their entrance to the U.S. Can you imagine our American students studying abroad tolerating that when they went into another country, that, okay, they have to check in with the university, and then within a month they have to also report again to another secondary immigration inspection. So thankfully that has gone out, that process has been put behind, but replaced by now fingerprinting of everybody at the airline.
I'd just like to add to that one thought, that it's not just students. This whole ambiance of being afraid of the other, this xenophobia, is still around. Perhaps a certain procedure has been changed by another procedure, but basically there is still this overriding fear of immigration in general. And it is holistic and much greater than just the student visas. And it's always amazing to me. You think of America as the place of immigrants, and being an immigrant today in America is a hard thing to be. Again, these are the official avenues that are hard. What we were talking about, hopefully, is the community, the people that we talk to. And the two things are not independent of each other, but of course, the point is to try to talk, the efforts that you're talking about, to make efforts to change the whole atmosphere and not just that one procedure.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Jill?
I'm sorry, mine's going to be a comment. Do you not want it?
Do you not? Can you make it up here because we're trying to record it?
Okay. Well, can I speak just loudly?
Go ahead.
Okay. The comment I wanted to make is that we who are Americans, who don't look different, also had things that changed. And Anat touched on it briefly in terms of civil liberties and privacy. And for those of us who are adults and living through all of this, things like the Patriot Act, which sounds so wonderful. We all want to be patriotic. And we all are patriotic, but it allowed internal, the government to spy on its own citizens. There were times when public libraries had to turn over what books people had taken out of the library to see what you were reading. And that was a real impact on everybody in terms of what we as Americans always thought of as our own rights. That we could read anything we want, we could do anything we want, we could go anywhere we want. So I think that it's from a different perspective, but sometimes we think, oh, well, you know, we were born here, there was no real, that kind of impact there wasn't that kind of impact on us. But there really was, and a lot of things with privacy. Obviously getting on a plane, and the fact that I can't take more than 3 ounces worth of my, you know, my shampoo with me, kind of thing. And now you say, well, that's a minor thing, but again, it is a limitation on our privacy and what we're carrying and what we're wearing, and these scanners now that can see through your clothes and all that kind of stuff. And we've said, okay, that's our trade-off. But you know, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't have to do those kinds of things, and we felt safe, or we felt that the balance of being fearful versus our privacy. We would rather have the privacy and not be fearful all the time. So I think there has been an impact on people here who, in a different way, that we need to talk about or think about.
You want to make any comments on that?
I wanted to say that I'm so happy to see that in America, in the U.S., those things are on the table, as I said. People are worried about it. People are writing about it. People are acting about it, as are people around the world. In Israel, the bubble is much smaller. People are worried about it, but the people worried about it are in a small bubble. So the question is, can we get out of that fear syndrome and go forward?
One more question, go ahead.
I'm not sure how long you've been in the United States after, obviously being born in Pakistan, but what would you say is a bigger sacrifice? Having, obviously there's been like a big spike in suicide bombings in Pakistan over the last couple of weeks. I think there was just one on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. But what's the bigger sacrifice for you? Your physical security in terms of you maybe had chosen to stay in Pakistan, or your emotional security living in the States?
Well, talking about suicide bombing, it's not only the last week, it's been happening for the entire month. And in the whole month of Ramadan, about 300 people have been killed. But this is strictly, there is so much going on between politicians. And it's not the religious issue, it's the politicians' issue, because they are, this has never happened. I was asking most of the people to please pray for my country, please pray for the city where I was born, because the Karachi has been in a very difficult situation right now. But at this point where I really wanted to go there, but I'm just afraid. I'm just afraid because there is no security at this time. This is election is coming, and politicians are playing kind of game where they are, I don't know, I don't want to go. It's so dirty and it's so bad that it's something I can't even describe. But at this time, when the situation is that bad, I would rather stay in a safe place, because I do have a kid and they need mother.
You want to comment? Okay. I think that's all the time we have. We have another program that starts at 2 o'clock, and we just want to get set up for it. It's going to be on the media in 9/11, and so we invite you to stay. And we also have another one at 3:30, which is about international security and homeland security and international business. So we would love to have you come. I do want to mention briefly that we are going to read the names of all the people that died on 9/11 on Sunday, beginning at 10:03 a.m. And I'm still looking for a few people that may want to read about 25 of the 25 names or so as a part of the ceremony that day. So thank you all for coming. Can we give them one more round of applause?
Thank you, Dr.